So we're up to Siman Pei Zayin Sif Dalid. Sif Dalid is pretty short. There is a Shach and Taz on it. And then this ends this part of this Siman. This is a long Siman. It's one of the longer Simanim in all of Basar B'Chalav. Once you get through Sif Dalid, Sif Hey through the end is fairly quick. There's not as much things that are relevant. We'll move at a... You know how I've been getting a lot of people saying that I'm going too slow. So don't worry, we'll start moving a little bit quicker. But I wanted to basically to wrap up Sif Daled, and then I'll do a quick review of everything we've learned till now. So it's like this. There is a very Yesodistic Taz, but I want to go out of order. I know I'm not going through the whole Taz inside, which I normally do, but I want to just take a snippet of that Taz a little bit out of order to make it a little this is how my brain functions. We saw last time that the Ramah and the Shach have a machlokes, a fundamental machlokes as to when does Maris Ayin apply. Maris Ayin again means that I'm doing something which is technically permissible, but it looks bad. Like I'm using almond milk. When is that a problem? So the Ramah said, here's the rule. If what it looks like you're doing is an Isser Doraisa, then it's a problem of Marasayin, and the way to rectify that is putting the almonds out. If what it looks like you're doing is an Issa D'Rabbanan, don't worry. That's what the Machlokes, the Shach disagreed, and he felt, no, there's Marasayin even on a rabbinic prohibition as well. So, here's the Shaila. If I'm cooking chicken in milk, no almond milk, regular milk, I'm taking chicken, I'm cooking it in milk. What is the status of what I'm doing? This is part of the review a little bit. So chicken and milk is only rabbinic. We learned in Sif Aleph, in the beginning of the Shulchan Aruch, when the entire thing is only rabbinic, from beginning to end, there's only a problem of eating. There's no problem of cooking, and there's no problem of benefit. You're allowed to cook chicken and milk. Straight up, mutter bebishel. You're allowed to take chicken and cook it in milk. No problem. Here's the question though. I get that there's no Basar B'Chalav D'Rabbanan, meaning there's no Isser of cooking. I get it. Chazal permitted me to cook it. But is it a problem of Maris Ayin? So I would say, no. I mean, if you're allowed to cook, you're allowed to cook. And what does it look like I'm doing? It looks like I'm cooking chicken and milk. Chicken and milk is allowed to be cooked. So what's the concern exactly? Like, what does it look like I'm doing? It looks like I'm doing something permissible. I'm cooking chicken and milk, which is allowed. It doesn't look bad. I mean, it looks like, maybe people who don't know the halacha will be confused by it, but it's technically fine. There is a Taz. Now, this is in middle of Taz Sif Katan Hey, which I generally like to do the whole Taz. I can't this time because it'll take too long and it'll throw us off a little bit. But the Taz has a snippet. I did put it on the sheets, but again, we have different Tazes, but it's halfway through Sif Katan Hey. The Taz says as follows. Mikol Makom Pashut Be'enai. This is a standalone statement. That's why sometimes the Taz, you have to know this, there can be very long Taz and Shachs where they're commenting on the Shulchan Aruch, commenting on the Ramah, and then sometimes they'll just sort of say a standalone statement. The Taz says as follows. Pashut Be'enai. It's simple to me. Delafizeh kol shekain sheyesh la'eser mipnei maris ayin levashel basar oif b'chalav. I believe, says the Taz, that cooking chicken and milk is always a problem in Maris Ayin. You'll say, well, what's in Maris Ayin? What does it look like I'm doing? Cooking chicken and milk? You're allowed to cook chicken and milk. What's the problem? Says the Taz, I believe it's a problem. Shegazu bar rabbanim behedya iser basar b'chalav ulechad tana hava be'emes doraisa. Because basar b'chalav, chicken and milk, it's pretty severe. We always treat it as the severity of milk and meat. And according to some Tanoim, it's an Issa Doraisa, which if you remember last time, the Marshal holds that way. So the point is, says the Taz, I believe it's a problem of Maris Ayin every single time. So it's like one of those where it's, we started the first day, we said that you could take chicken and milk, you can't eat it, but you're allowed to cook it and allowed to benefit from it. Now, says the Taz, I believe there's a side issue of Maris Ayin. Why? Okay, we'll get to this in a second. Sometimes chicken can look like meat. Meaning, he's saying the reason why I think it looks bad is because you're going to have a chicken cutlet, and you're going to be putting it in, and people will think, I guess it's, veal or something. They're going to think it's a light steak. So because, says the Taz, cooking chicken and milk, people might think that it's milk and meat together, it's a problem Marasayan. Do I think that chicken looks like meat? No, but I guess you could have sliced thin, and you're putting it in panko, and you're putting it in, in breadcrumbs, and then you're going to fry it in butter. I guess the average person who's looking at this might not know that it's chicken and might think that it's meat. So basically, just to summarize, the Taz believes that taking chicken and cooking it in milk is always an issue of Marasayan. And the way to avoid that, I guess, is you'll have to put a sign that it's chicken. I guess almonds. No, but it's not almond milk. It's actual milk. This is actual milk. This is chicken and actual milk. You'll have to put up a sign that this is chicken. This is chicken, not meat. I guess that's the sheet of the Taz. It's a big chiddush, but that's the sheet of the Taz. So if you look in the next paragraph, this is on the sheets exclusively, but again, it's pretty simple. The Badi HaShulchan, Rav Feivel Cohen, quotes this Taz, as most poskim do, but he says, I forgot. It's a, you don't need it anymore after this line. Again, according to the Taz, chicken and milk is a problem of Marasayan always. So although technically it's mutter from a Basar b'chalav perspective to cook, but it's a Marasayan issue. Says Rav Feivel Cohen, "Umashma mizeh she'ein lavash lo b'chalav tahar." You should never cook chicken in milk. Even though it's only rabbinic, it's a problem Marasayan. Why? Shaharoa sover, because the average onlooker will think shemavashal basar behema b'chalav, because people are not going to know that it's chicken; they're going to think it's meat. Okay, covered by basar b'chalav daraisa. So it looks like you're doing something that's biblically forbidden. It's a chiddush. It's a chiddush. Now that's the sheet of the Taz. The yesh, and I put in parentheses. This is the Levush. The Levush disagrees. He says lahakol b'zeh shesayvet dinikar bein basar oif lebasar behema. Says the Levush, who thinks chicken looks like meat? What are we talking about? So therefore, it's fine. So it's a machlokes, Taz, and the Levush, whether chicken and milk cooking it together is a problem of Marasayan. The Taz says yes. The Levush says it is not. Okay. Now, just to finish up, that was one quick point. We'll do a little bit more. We'll do one more point, and then I'll try to do a chazara, all of it today, but I'm seeing now that there's time moves quicker than I thought. Sif Dalet. The Mechaber says like this: Osir levashel b'cholav isha. You're not allowed to take a steak and cook it in breast milk. Again, now the halacha of breast milk is not considered milk at all in halacha. It's not, it's not basar b'cholav. It's not. But it's like almond milk in that it's a problem of Marasayan. No one's going to look at that and know that you have this thing that you do that you cook in breast milk. They're just going to assume that you're a normal person and that's regular milk. So says the Mechaber, there's some people's faces, maybe for some people it's not so rough. Asir levashel b'cholav isha, you're not allowed to cook meat in cholav isha, because of Marasayan. Now, by the way, but the Mechaber just clarifies, if some of that milk, that breast milk, were to fall into cholent, it would be fine. You don't need shishim. It's not milk. It's not halachically milk. When milk falls into meat, you need shishim and you have issues. This is not milk. It's not milk at all. It's Marasayan. Marasayan is not going to cause a problem. A little bit of milk. It's not milk. Says the Mechaber, ve'ein tzarich shir. You don't need shishim. Don't worry. It's not milk. Fine. Comes the Ramah. Now this is where the Ramah throws a little bit of a wrench. We spoke, I think it was 2 shiurim ago. What is the status of a pork chop? I take a pork chop and I cook it in milk. Pork chop in milk. So if you remember, the Mechaber Shita was very clear. It is not Basar b'chalav at all. Meaning, let's go through this. 3 things, right? There's cooking, eating, and benefit. Let's go through each one. Can I eat it? No, because it's a pork chop. Great. Can I cook it? Yes. Can I benefit? Yes. It's not Basar b'chalav. The Mechaber clearly said in Sif Gimel, his lashon was mutter bebishul ubahana. Mutter bebishul, allowed. Says the Ramah, not so fast. I believe that it's a problem of Marasayan. If you're so worried about Marasayan and you see someone taking a pork chop and cooking it in milk, why is that not Marasayan? And by the way, pork chops, I don't know what they look like, but they probably look more like steaks than chicken, right? So pork chops are a problem. So says the Ramah, I understand that we said 2 shiurim ago that it's mutter. It's not basar b'chalav, but there's a side issue of Marasayan. So says the Ramah, v'nira lefizeh. The Ramah says, now that we're talking about Marasayan constantly, I'd like to clarify, the kol shekain, the osir levashel lichachila b'cholav tameya. Taking meat and cooking it in pork milk, or taking a pork chop and putting it into kosher milk, although we said 2 shiurim ago from the mechaber, it's mutter, it may not be basar b'cholov, but I believe it's marasayin. Okay. V'davka basar behema aval b'chof derabanan elachush, but you could take chicken and put it in pork milk because that's so removed from being an issue, that's fine. But meat, pork chop, and milk is a problem of marasayin. Okay. Says the Shach like this. The Shach saying like this. So, according to the Ramah, what you'd have to say is that when you learn Sif Gimel, when the Mechaber says, Basar behema temeya, mutter bebishal ubahana, what it means is, it's mutter in bishal from the laws of Basar b'chalav, but it's a problem of marasayin. That's what you'd have to say according to the Mechaber. According to the Ramah. Says the Shach, let me just sort of say this outside, then we'll see it inside. The Shach says, this is very hard to accept. We had it 2 days ago. The Mechaber was pretty clear, mutter bebishal. And by the way, this Mechaber who says that you're allowed to cook pork chops and milk, it's not a creation of the Mechaber. It's from a Rashba, and it's based on a Mishnah. It's mutter. The Mishnah says mutter. So according to the Ramah, what you have to say is, it's mutter from Basar b'cholov's perspective, but it's a problem of marasayin. It's a stretch. It's a stretch. So here's the Shach's perspective, and then we'll see it inside. The Shach believes like this. According to the Ramah, it's a problem of marasayin. Correct, yeah, it's marasayin. I mean, it's not even derabanan. You can't cook. You're allowed to cook it from the laws of Basar b'cholov, but you rabbinically cannot cook it because of marasayin. The problem is, says the Shach, that's not what the Mechaber says. The Shulchan Aruch says mutter. The Shulchan Aruch says mutter. Not mutter, avol, mutter. Mutter is mutter. So the Shach believes like this. According to the Shulchan Aruch, according to the Mechaber, you're allowed to take a pork chop and cook it in milk. It's clear as day. The Ramah disagrees. The Ramah believes it's marasayin. The Shulchan Aruch does not. So let me ask you a question. Why not? Why isn't it marasayin? I think it's a good point. We're so worried about marasayin with almond milk and with fake butter, and so why isn't it marasayin to take a pork chop and cook it in milk? Why isn't it? Like the Ramah, I think, is making a valid point. The Ramah is saying it's a problem of marasayin. It's a bad optic. I think it's a bad optic. I think if you walked home and you saw your wife taking a pork chop and just frying it in butter, you'd be like, "What are we doing? Right? What's going on over here?" So the Ramah says it's a problem of marasayin. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't agree. The Shulchan Aruch says mutter. And if the Shulchan Aruch said it was a problem, he would say it's a problem. He says mutter. So why is the Shulchan Aruch not worried about marasayin? Says the Shach a tremendous chiddush, a big chiddush. I don't really understand where he gets this from. This is his own chiddush. That's the definition of a chiddush. He says like this: there is no maris ayin on cooking, ever. I don't care what you're doing. You'll never have a maris ayin when you're cooking. You'll only have a maris ayin when you're eating. We'll see it inside, but the Shach Shita is you'll never have maris ayin when you're cooking. You say, why not? Cooking is a problem. If I'm cooking something that looks, if I take a steak and I'm cooking it in almond milk, that looks like what I'm doing is wrong. The Shach would say it's fine. Why? I'll tell you why. If I walk in and I see someone cooking milk and meat together, the truth is there are situations where it's allowed. What's one situation where you're allowed to cook milk and meat together? For a chola. Someone is really, really ill, you can cook for him. Now here's the thing, if I walk into someone's house, I walk into Reuven's house, I know Reuven's not sick. If he's eating, milk and meat, what looks like a meat in almond milk, it's like the only heter to do that is if you're a chola. You're not a chola. But cooking, he could be cooking for a chola. So as long as it's plausible that he could be cooking for a chola, there's never maris ayin. In other words, according to the Shach, maris ayin only exists on eating, because eating, I know you're not sick. Why are you eating? It doesn't look good. But cooking, even though cooking is as prohibited as eating, but you could always be cooking and shipping it to a chola. And because that's possible, there is no maris ayin ever on cooking. Ever. So back to our discussion, we had a point. The Mechaber had said that you're allowed to cook pork chops and milk. Says the Ramah, that's a maris ayin issue. No, Shulchan Aruch says it's mutter. Why not? Why isn't it maris ayin? The answer is because there is no maris ayin on cooking. Ever. There's only going to be maris ayin on eating, and you're not eating a pork chop anyway, because it's a pork chop. Very good point. So according to the Shach, there's never maris ayin on cooking, only on eating. So I've made a very good point. The Mechaber says in Dalid, Osir levashel b'chalav. You'll have to change that word to le'echol. as anyone who does Shas, although it's a little bit harder in the Shulchan Aruch, anyone who does Daf Yomi is familiar with this concept. Tzarech loymar, you'll have to translate it differently. But let's see the Shach inside. But that's the basic premise of the Shach. There is no Maris Ayin on cooking ever. There's only Maris Ayin on eating. And a pork chop in milk, you're never eating it anyway. The shaila is whether there's a problem with Maris Ayin on cooking. The Ramah says yes. The Shulchan Aruch says no, because there's never Maris Ayin on cooking. That's the sheet of the Shach. Let's just see it inside. The Shach says, again, the Mechaber had said you're not allowed to cook meat in breast milk because of Maris Ayin. Then the Ramah said, I believe to take a pork chop and cook it in milk is a problem of Maris Ayin as well. Says the Shach, Lefidas Harav. The Rav is the Ramah. According to the Ramah, to kol shekenhu, the tzarech liyashev, meaning according to the Ramah that it's a problem of Maris Ayin, tzarech liyashev, so you'll have to now go back 2 days ago, that hadikasav hatur v'shulchan aruch b'sif gimel, that which the Tur and Shulchan Aruch said in Sif Gimel, mutarim b'bishul v'hana, that when the Mechaber had said 2 days ago, which is a Mishnah, that you're allowed to take a pork chop and cook it in milk, what you'll have to say is, according to the Ramah, it's a problem of Maris Ayin. So the Ramah would have to tell you, when we said it's mutter, we meant it's not a problem of Basar b'chalav, but it's a problem of Maris Ayin. That's what you'll have to say. Says the Vahana, hu Mishnah arucha beperika kol habasar, umuskim kol haposkim. It's a Mishnah. Hainu mutter medina av Mishnah Maris Ayin loy. Myri. So according to the Ramah would have to read the Mishnah is as follows: I'm allowed to cook a pork chop in milk from the laws of Basar b'chalav, but there'll be a side issue of Maris Ayin. That's what you'd have to say according to the Ramah. That's how the Ramah would translate the Mishnah in Chulin. And he says, V'nafka mina, so according to the Ramah, if it's a problem anyway, when is it mutter? It's mutter when there is no Maris Ayin. Begavni delekal amechash Maris Ayin, going l'refua, ukiyotzevo, like a case of refua, k'moshe kasav marshal, gabi chol of isha, l'refua shari, afil ein bo sakana klal. That if it's a chola, there's no Maris Ayin, so that's what the Ramah will have to interpret. Again, don't get bogged down in the Ramah believes that it's a problem. Now says the Shach in a few lines later, he says, I'll just skip a few lines because it's running a little bit late. Ochein, divrei hapoiskim shekosvu stama mutarim bebishol, mashma da'afilu mishum maris ayin leka. But that is not the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says you're allowed to take a pork chop, mutter. Mutter means mutter, so it's mutter. So why is the Shulchan Aruch not concerned about Maris Ayin with a pork chop? B'chein niver divrei marshal, b'kam mashmadav mechaber. That's the mechaber marshal. Midoloi kosa b'chol behemat mei agufei da'asim shemaris Ayin. The Shulchan Aruch never says it's a problem of Maris Ayin. He says mutter. Mutter means mutter. So why is it not a problem of Maris Ayin? L'kach nirli barer. Deshani hasam kivan dal kolponim echa mehem aser b'achila. Because says the Shach, over there when it comes to a pork chop, you're not talking about eating because it's a pork chop anyway. What are you entertaining the notion? Cooking. Says the Shach, Devadai bibishel lichudei leka mishum maris ayin. There is never maris ayin on the isser of cooking, ever. Because it could be you're cooking for a chola. So if I walk into someone's kitchen and I see them taking a steak and cooking it in almond milk, according to the Shach, no problem. You don't have to put the almonds out. There is no problem on cooking. Why? You don't need almonds to be melamed zchus on Klal Yisrael. You should say they're probably cooking for a chola. When do you need to put the almonds out? When you're eating, not when you're cooking. Says the Shach. So obvious question, which is, Hai osir levashel, but doesn't the Shulchan Aruch say that it's a problem of Maris Ayin levashel? Hai nu le'echol. What it means is le'echol. That's what it means. Okay, again, that's just to last little bit to just sort of put a bow on. We'll pause on the Shach. Now what I'd like to do over the next few minutes, because I know this was a lot today, I know it's already 20 minutes in, I'd like to begin the Chazara. I might have to continue the Chazara next time, depending on how long this takes. But let's just quickly review what we've done over the last 4 Sifim. That way maybe even next week we could start new things. Next week, like I said, we'll be able to move. The next 6 or 7 Sifim are really not as relevant, so we'll be able to move a little bit. We began with the pasuk says lo sevashel gedi b'chalev mo 3 times. One is that there's an isser of cooking milk and meat. One is that there's an isser of eating milk and meat, and one is that there's an isser of benefiting from milk and meat. So the Shulchan Aruch says, so why does it say lo sevashel 3 times? Just say lo se'echal, lo sevashel, v'lo lahanos. Speak it out. So the Shulchan Aruch says the only time it's biblically forbidden is if they're cooked together. Meaning it's only aser d'oraisa basar b'chalav if they're cooked together. So if I have a burger and a cold cup of milk, there is no basar b'chalav doraisa. Basar b'chalav doraisa is only if they're cooked together. If they're not cooked together, it's only rabbinic. Now we said, what is even, by the way, that means that even if there's a transfer of flavor, meaning I could have a steak, I could take a piece of a burger and soak it in milk for 24 hours. That's called kavush. It's saturated with the flavor of milk. It is not biblically forbidden because it's only asur d'oraisa if they're cooked together. So if I salt it together, even though there's a transfer of flavor, if I soak it for 24 hours, even though there's a transfer of flavor, it is not biblically forbidden. It's only rabbinic. Now, we said that according to most opinions, most poskim, all forms of cooking is considered d'oraisa. It doesn't have to be cooked in a liquid. Roasting is asur d'oraisa according to most opinions. Tigun, pan searing, definitely deep frying. Pashtus, according to most opinions, this is all asur d'oraisa as well. We mentioned, what about a microwave? Cooking in a microwave where the walls of the microwave are cold. Is that considered bishul d'oraisa or d'rabanan? Is it considered bishul on a biblical level or not? We said that the poskim were unclear, and I also mentioned that the shaila of the status of a microwave is also just agav, just good to remember. It's also negeh bishul akum. Is it a problem to cook bishul akum if a guy cooks in a microwave? I mentioned some machlekes OU and Star K, if you wanted to boil it down to modern day kashrus, or cooking on Shabbos with a microwave, is it considered bishul d'oraisa? Or Moshe famously said yes, or Shlomo Zalman disagreed. It's a shaila there as well. Now, anytime it's not cooked together, it's only rabbinic. If it's only rabbinic, you're allowed to, it's only asur d'rabanan le'echol. There is no isur d'rabanan on bishul, and there is no isur d'rabanan on hana. Meaning, if I have a chicken and milk is only rabbinic. The whole isur d'rabanan, Chazal only made their isur d'rabanan on achila. They did not create an isur d'rabanan on bishul, and they did not create an isur d'rabanan on hana. So that was the first Taz in Shach, the first Taz on the Siman Pei Zayin. He brings down that the Marshal disagrees. The Marshal believes there is an Isser d'Rabbanan, but we don't paskin that way. We paskin that if something is only Asser d'Rabbanan, mutter levashel umutter lahanos. Now we mentioned today, it could be chicken and milk will be a problem of Marisayan according to the Taz, but the Levush would disagree. So that's, anytime it's only Asser d'Rabbanan, it's an Isser Achila, but there is no Isser Bishul and there is no Isser Hana. Whether there's Marisayan, that's a subject of today's debate between the Taz and the Levush. If I could take chicken, so I'm allowed to bin Torah to cook chicken and milk, and I'm allowed to sell it. I just can't eat it, rabbinically. Whether I'm allowed to mitzad marasayin is a machlokas Taz and Levush. Now, we said if basar b'chalav is doraisa, you're not allowed to benefit from it. So what do you do with it? So we said you have to bury it. You can't sell it. You can't even feed a dog with it because that's considered hana. Feeding a dog, even if you don't own the dog, is also hana. And we did mention, though, from the Badi HaShulchan, from the Meiri, that if something is asur b'hana, basar b'chalav is asur b'hana, but I end up selling it, so I do something wrong. You're not supposed to sell it, but I did. You can keep the money. You don't have to throw the money in the toilet. The Chazal didn't asur, the Torah didn't asur the money that was received in exchange for basar b'chalav. That was all Sif Aleph. Sif Beis, the Shulchan Aruch tells us, very simple, that although the pasuk says lo sevashel gedi b'chalev mo, which is a goat in its mother's milk, it applies to all kosher animals and all kosher milk. So it could be a cow, it could be a lamb, it could be a goat, and any milk. It doesn't have to be the mother's milk. All kosher milk. The Torah just picked the most common case of a gedi b'chalev mo, but it applies to all kosher meat and all kosher milk as well. Now, the Mechaber then in Sif Gimel, and that's going to take us till the end of today. So Sif Gimel, there's a couple of components in the Mechaber. I actually missed a word. I apologize. Basar behema timeya b'chalav. So the Mechaber began Sif Daled by telling us that if I take a pork chop and I cook it in milk, it is not basar b'chalav at all. Nothing. It's not basar b'chalav at all. Not d'oraisa, not d'rabanan. So what does that mean? That means that, again, you can't eat it because it's chazer. But you're allowed to cook it, and you're allowed to benefit from it, 100% mutter. Now we said, on that mechaber, the Shach brought down from a Bach that he felt that it is rabbinically basar b'chalav, and it creates certain stringencies when it comes to Hanan. He would say that a pork chop cooked in milk, if you were to eat it, you'd be punished for two things: a pork, and for basar b'chalav d'Rabbanan. The Shach responded to the Bach by saying, I understand that if it's Basar B'chalav D'Rabbanan, there are stringencies, but there's no motivation from Chazal's perspective to create an Issa D'Rabbanan. The point of Isurim D'Rabbanan are to have an effect. They're to stop you. If I'm willing to eat a pork chop, I'm pretty sure I'm willing to power through an Issa D'Rabbanan as well. So therefore, Chazal did not create an Issa D'Rabbanan on the eating. That's the opinion of the Shach. The Shach disagrees with the Bach.
Why does no one say that? What we just covered today? Cooking treat with milk. It's already treat.
Yeah, but there's no Issa cooking. We'll get to it in a second. And so we'll get to it afterwards. So the point is, just to finish up. So the point is like this. So pork chop in milk, the Mechaber says, is not Basar B'chalav at all. Again, according to the Bach, it's Basar B'chalav D'Rabbanan, but the Shulchan Aruch says it's nothing. Then we just saw today, the Ramah believes that it's a problem of Maris Ayin on the cooking. The Shach responds, there is no Maris Ayin on cooking ever. That was that last component on Basar B'chalav Tameya.
Explain the Shulchan Aruch. It's not arguing on the Ramah, is it? Just explain the Shulchan Aruch.
The Shach is explaining the... Yeah. He's saying the Mechaber disagrees with the Ramah. Correct. Now, Basar Nevela, which is... So we've talked about milk and meat is a problem. We've talked about pork chops and milk, which is not Basar B'chalav at all. Maybe Marasayan, maybe not. What about Nevela, which is kosher meat, but not shechted properly, like McDonald's, a beef patty from McDonald's. So the Pischei Tshuva brought down, obviously you can't eat it because it's Nevela anyway, so you definitely can't eat it. But the Pischei Tshuva brought down from the Noid Yehuda, it's Aser Levashel Min HaTorah, and whether it's Aser Bahana, so can I sell McDonald's, cheeseburger, which is cheese on an Nevela burger, so is it allowed to be sold? Is it Mutter Bahana? The Pischei Tshuva brought down that it's a machlokes between Rav Kiva Eger and the Noid Yehuda and the Pri Megadim. It's a machlokes haposkim, whether there's a problem of Hana on Basar Nevela. Now,
but everybody agrees Bishul is...
Everyone agrees Bishul is Asa D'Oraisa, the Shaila is Hana, it's a machlokes. Now, when it comes to chicken and milk, the Mechaber says it's not Basar B'chalav D'Oraisa, it's only D'Rabbanan, meaning the whole thing is only D'Rabbanan, and therefore it's Asa Le'echol D'Rabbanan, Mutter Levashel, Mutter Lahanos. There's no, so it's only D'Rabbanan. We did bring down from the Taz and the Shach that the Marshal disagrees, but we paskin that chicken and milk is entirely a rabbinic creation. It's not D'Oraisa, it's a rabbinic creation. So you're allowed to cook. Whether it's a problem of Marasayan that we mentioned before, the Taz says yes, the Levush says no. Now that's chicken and milk. Okay. Now, the Mechaber then said, though, you're allowed to take fish and milk together. That's not a problem of Basar B'chalav. Fish and milk is okay. The Taz and the Shach and the Ramah all reference that although the Mechaber says it's mutter in his Sefer Shulchan Aruch, in Beis Yosef he said that it's a side issue, that it's dangerous. They believe that that's a printing error, that he was actually meant to write fish and meat are a problem, not fish and milk. It was a printing error. But that being the case, despite that being the case, that it might have been a printing error, we mentioned that the Sfardim are makbid, that they will not eat fish and meat, fish and milk or fish and cheese together. Butter, yes, but fish and milk and fish and cheese they will not eat. We also mentioned, just as an aside, Satmar is also makbid, Belz is makbid, and it seems Chabad unclear. The Tzemach Tzedek did say you should be machmer under certain circumstances. I saw a sikha from the Rebbe, Igris from the Rebbe. The Rebbe referenced it that he said it probably was a printing error, but the Tzemach Tzedek said Chabad should be makbid, so they are makbid under certain circumstances. Okay, so that's when it comes to fish and milk together. Debatable whether it's a toast or not. Fine. Because we mentioned that, we also decided let's talk about fish and meat, which is for sure a problem of danger. That's from the Gemara. Now I mentioned though, it's not a spiritual danger, it's a physical danger. So therefore the Magen Avram in the 1600s already referenced, I don't know if it's such a problem anymore, because he said, I spoke to the doctors, they don't really think it's an issue. We don't paskin like that in Magen Avram outright. If you were to have meat and put fish on the same plate, it would be a problem. No one would eat that, but it would be something that they would add as a sniff lahakal. Then we referenced Worcestershire sauce, which we said the halacha is that the OU policy is that is a sauce that has anchovies in it, but people invariably will put it on a steak. So is it a problem to give a hechsher? So they said like this. You have the Magen Avram who says it may not apply anymore. Also, in the sauce, it's already nullified. It's not more than 2%. It's batal b'shishim within the sauce itself. So it's already batal b'shishim whenever you put it on the meat. Rav Shechter and Rebelsky said it's fine. They said you don't even have to put an OU fish symbol because it's so minuscule amount in the sauce. You just have to write it in the ingredients. But if there's more than 2% of anchovies in the sauce, so meaning it's not batal b'shishim in the sauce, let's say it's 10% anchovies, then the OU will actually have to write OU fish. There's a fish symbol that they have, because then people should not be putting it on meat because it's not batal b'shishim, so that they will have to reference it in the hechsher itself so that people know, hey, don't put this on meat. The Ramah, then we talked about Maris Ayin. The Ramah's Shita is that Maris Ayin does not apply on an Issa D'Rabbanan. So if what I'm doing at the worst looks like an Issa D'Rabbanan, there is no problem in Maris Ayin. That's the Ramah Shita. The Shach disagrees. He says, no, Maris Ayin is a problem even on an Issa D'Rabbanan. We did mention, though, that Tosfos has an interesting middle ground. Tosfos' Shita is, and it's brought down by the Mishabura and Siman Shin Aleph and Hilchos Shabbos, that Tosfos believes that there is Maris Ayin on an Issa D'Rabbanan and an Issa D'Oraisa, but there's a difference. Maris Ayin on an Issa D'Oraisa applies even if no one's around. So if what it looks like I'm doing is Asa D'Oraisa, I'm not allowed to do it even if I'm in the solitude of my home. So when it comes to hanging clothing on Shabbos after a rainstorm, so it looks like I did laundry, which is an Issa D'Oraisa, I can't do that even if there's no one around to judge me improperly. But in Maris Ayin on an Issa D'Rabbanan will only apply in front of others. If there's no one around, I'd be allowed to do this. So according to Tosfos, you'd be able to take chicken and cook it in almond milk, even according to the Shach, because it's at most it looks like an Issa D'Rabbanan if there's no one around. If you're at home alone, you could do it, because the whole thing is a Maris Ayin, Issa D'Rabbanan, only applies Befarhesia and not Bitsina.
So how can he be saying that Maris Ayin only applies to eating, which is D'Rabbanan altogether?
No, so it's the same thing. His point is that there's Maris Ayin on. I mean, according to Shach, how do you know that there's only Maris Ayin on eating? Wow. That's a side point. His point is that there's no Maris Ayin on cooking, because you could always be melamed schus on the person, and there's no limit schus when I see you eating a fake cheeseburger. I know you're not sick, so why are you eating it? We'll get to that in 1 second. I'm going to finish up. The Ramosha, I mentioned that there's no Maris Ayin on something that's of people being ignorant, meaning we mentioned for Ramosha that Maris Ayin only applies to something where even a rabbi would be confused. But doing something that's technically permissible, just because people don't know the halacha, does not create Maris Ayin in the worldview of Rav Moshe Feinstein. And the last thing we mentioned from the Shach today is that the Shach says there is no Maris Ayin on cooking. So you're allowed to take a steak and cook it in almond milk. According to the Shach, you'd be allowed to, even though we said Pashas, that's Maris Ayin, because there is no Maris Ayin on cooking, ever. Because if I see someone cooking, I should be Melamed Schos and say, even if they're cooking milk and meat together, which is normally forbidden, maybe they're going to bring it to the hospital for a chola who needs it. The only Maris Ayin applies on eating, because I know the guy's not a chola. So if I see him eating a burger with fake cheese on it, what's my limit schus? That he's a chayla? I know he's not a chayla. He's a friend of mine. So that's when it's a problem. That's the sheet of the Shach, which is, again, it's a big chiddush, because Pashtus, everyone else disagrees with that, but that's the chiddush of the Shach. Correct. Again, when there is Maris Ayin, it's fixable, it's rectifiable by putting out the almonds. When I say that something's a problem with Maris Ayin, it doesn't mean that it's a problem that you can't get past. It just means that it's something you have to deal with. The Shach would tell you, you could take a steak and cook it in fake milk and without anything there, without almonds there, because the whole thing is only on bishul, and there is no Maris Ayin on bishul bichlal. So that's sort of a summary. I know today was a little bit all over the place. Next time we'll continue in Sifhei. We'll sort of move fairly quickly, because again, they're not as relevant. I'll point out the very practical things as we go. But that was sort of a chazara, unless there's any questions. Yeah. I'm going to let the recording keep going.
I apologize with regard to not having it down, but last week when we went through that as a possibility that the Beis Yosef was a typo.
Either a typo or he wrote the wrong word.
Right, but you had a secondary source.
Correct. I forgot to mention it, that the Pischei Tshuva brings down from Rabbeinu Bachai. The Rabbeinu Bachai in Parshas Mishpatim does mention that it is a problem of fish and milk together, as it's a medicinal issue. Right. So it is hard to say it's a typo in two locations. it still might be either a typo, or the Rama would probably respond if he was here. He would probably say, it's a typo by the Beis Yosef, and Rabbeinu Bachai respectfully is a sefer on Chumash, and he said, I'm not. That's. I don't know what he would say. I think he would say that. I'm not saying that he didn't have respect for Rabbeinu Bachai, but to take a pirush on Chumash, and he's saying, listen, I'm dealing with the practical halachas. There is no. And by the way, just to add, fish and milk, there is no reference in Shas or anywhere really of it being a problem. It's fish and meat that the Gemara in Pesachim says is an issue. And the Shulchan Aruch, by the way, the Beis Yosef might have wrote that in his Beis Yosef. In his Shulchan Aruch, he doesn't. Which you could argue that's pretty glaring also. Like, if he felt that it was an issue, he would have written that himself, because he did write about fish and meat in Kuf Tezayin, and he doesn't mention fish and milk. So that's something too. That's a factor as well.
On this topic, are there other situations where the Beis Yosef writes something and it's not...
Yes, there are times, for the record, yes, there are times where the Beis Yosef will write something and not write in his Shulchan Aruch. But, no, it happens. But when you have it, it's debatable whether it's true. My point is, you do have concepts. The Beis Yosef was a much bigger sefer than the Shulchan Aruch. But usually, if he doesn't write it, there's a reason, and also this entire thing is now debatable. So it's not like it's an undisputed fact that for whatever reason he chose not to write in his Shulchan Aruch. He wrote a chiddush in his Beis Yosef that's not found anywhere outside of a Rabbeinu Bachai, and then he chooses not to write it in his Shulchan Aruch. You see why the Ramah and the Shach and the Taz and everybody is like, I don't think this is a thing.
Generally speaking, different Beis Yosef...
Usually, the Beis Yosef, the Shulchan Aruch is a shortened version of the Beis Yosef. It's usually there. Overwhelming majority. Yeah, there are times. Of course. But in this case specifically, they feel that it's a pretty glaring omission.
You passing like a shach or like a Ramah, and on this point
On which one?
of cooking the basar to me and
The shach is a chiddush. I think most opinions would assume there is marasayin on cooking.
I mean, either way, where I was saying on Ashkenazi, I'm going to Ramah versus there are shach explaining the Shulchan
Correct, but my point is, in general, I think the shach's opinion is a big chiddush. Most opinions assume there is marasayin on cooking. The shach's is a big chiddush. Like Taz, Pri Megadim, Kemat, everyone assumes not like the Shach. Listen, it's the Shach, and it's the Marasayin, so the whole thing's only Derabanan, and the Shach is the Paisik Hadar, so you could always follow him. But I'm just saying most opinions assume not like that, because even the Shach, Avi pointed out, the Shach has to now translate the Shulchan Aruch differently, that every time it says Livashel by Marasayin, it's Le'echol, which is a bit of a daichik.
And the Taz that says you cannot cook
chicken and milk together, Marasayin. So the Ramah, I didn't want to get too in the details. The Ramah is referring to chicken in pig milk. Chicken in pig milk, the Ramah says, is okay. The Taz felt that chicken in milk, the Ramah would feel is a problem. Even though pig milk, and I guess pig milk doesn't really look, if you actually look at the Taz, for the point, the Taz says, Mikol Makom Pashamei de Lefi Zeh. Lefi Zeh is the words of the Ramah. Kol shekein sheyesh lesem marasayin levashel bas b'chol. Meaning the Ramah would tell you, you're allowed to cook chicken in pig milk, but not chicken in milk. It's a chiddush. I guess it's too many steps removed.
But didn't you just say with regard to...
That's why today's a little bit of all over the place.
Basar B'chal, when you said
Yeah.
you were saying it's any milk.
Correct.
So why is pig's milk being specified, specifically?
I guess pig's milk looks different. I think it has a greenish complexion. So I guess when you're dealing in the world of Marasayan, pig milk is not going to be the same as regular milk because it doesn't look the same, even though there is generally marasayin. I understand the problem. Generally, we do treat pig milk when it comes to marasayin as regular milk. I don't know. It's a...
We're saying chicken.
Correct.
Why don't we have any sort of association then with fish? Fish could look more like meat than chicken.
I don't know. It's a good question. I guess...
Chicken and meat.
Yeah.
No, you can
I guess
have
a tuna
fish.
steak. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question.